would help us get to the specific value that we're trying to derive from the solution, and what is the overall context within which we are operating. And these measures, they're really based on, for example, the enterprise, again, the business objectives and the goals, very strategic, the vision, mission, values, strategic and tactical objectives, and then the KPIs that we have just kind of decided in the previous couple of activities. The risk level of the solution, what is the kind of risk level? Is it going to be either qualitative aspect of it or the quantitative, and how it's going to accept the risks or try and mitigate the risks with the set of management approaches that you have outlined. And then what is the risk tolerance of both stakeholders? How risk aversive you are or how risk embracing you are really depends on the organization's policies or the structure or the overall culture of the organization sometimes. If it's, for example, a life sciences or banking, for example, life sciences, healthcare kind of a thing, then it has got a high level of risk taking, considering they have got huge set of expenditures on the research and development. They won't actually come out with a newer drug or the newer molecule to defeat the disease. For example, currently the pandemic that we are all into, this is because of the virus, right? The COVID-19 virus, and a lot of these companies which have got significant investments in the last few years, they have got now come together to form that kind of coalition, and then they consolidated their operations. They wanted to come together to be able to fight this together, and that's why they are spread across different countries. For example, one of the leading companies in this has actually got their base in Germany. They've got their labs and everything in Germany. From there, they have been collaborating with another company based in the US. They're tied together, they have joined together, they merged, and they've actually got these so many companies trying to pump money into that because it's the need of the hour. So they created this vaccine together, which is a huge investment, which is a significant investment. And that's because they're actually trying to take risk, get more people, and to test more people, you need more investment. So that's why it is most of these life sciences and healthcare companies, they're risk taking and risk embracing. Whereas banks, for example, some of the on the other completely on the other side of the spectrum is the banking and the financial institutions, where they are careful. I'm not saying they're risk aversive, but they're very, very, very careful about and cautious about which risks they are willing to take. And that's where, for example, they've got the beating already about 10, 15 years ago with the subprime crisis, with all the real estate and with all the crises that have hit the banking sector. They were very cautious. They've been very cautious on that side. So they sit on the extreme side of risk aversion, where they're trying to be very, very cautious in terms of giving off loans or giving off funding and things like that. Even the interest rates and all these things are bound to that kind of risk aversion coming in from that sector. So it really you need to understand which industry you're working in, what kind of organization is it, what's the work culture of the organization, in order to understand the risk tolerance of that. And obviously, tied to that is the set of stated objectives, stated targets, anything that is specific to the product. Is it something to do with the service level agreements or the performance targets that you have set out for only for that product? Again, those need to be considered. So in terms of the inputs for this one, we have the implemented solution. We have got the solution to whatever stage it is. That is going to be a key input. We look at the performance of that. We look at the solution performance analysis coming in from the previous activity. That is going to be the input into this one. And then with that as the input in the baseline, we would have to look at the assessment of the solution limitation. What are the constraints within which the solution is really operating? Again, the basis for that is the change strategy, the approach, the technique, the methods, very important. The risk analysis results that are coming in from the analysis that we have just carried out, as I was mentioning. And more importantly, the solution scope, the scope of the proposed solution within which it is going to operate, the environment, the technology, the business constraints, the business rules, all of those would determine the scope of the solution. And the solution limitation or the constraints would be the output, and these are going to be this output is going to be used by the other activities like the analyze current state and recommend actions to increase the solution value, which we're going to discuss in the next few slides. These are the two activities that are following this one. So what do we need to do as BAs here to assess the solution limitations? We need to understand the internal solution, whatever the deficiencies, what are the lacks, that lacunae that it has, whatever the kind of constraints that we're operating within that internal solution. Mostly these are technical, these are something to do within the context of that solution. It has nothing to do with the business. So we need to be conscious of this to understand what are the technology considerations, what are the, for example, if you've got Microsoft house that you are currently working in, which is Microsoft C# being the primary coding technology, the .NET, Visual Studio .NET, and Dynamics, and all of these Microsoft tools, Office 365. If this is the kind of solution framework and application set that you're trying to use in your organization for various purposes, for productivity, for development, for implementation process, ERP, for example, Dynamics is an ERP one. So you've got different offerings from Microsoft, so primarily Microsoft house. In that context, would you like to, for example, if you are trying to build a new product, create a new application, are you open for considering an open source application, like for example, a Java based or PHP or MySQL or some completely different kind of a solution which is not fitting into the Microsoft, which requires perhaps, if there's a lot of different interfaces and interactions with the existing applications, then perhaps you might have to think hard whether that is the right solution architecture that you're proposing, or the right solution stack that you're proposing, because it might not be in a position to work in tandem with the existing set of tools and the solutions and options that you already have. So that's one thing you need to really consider. And once you understand those deficiencies, those lacunae, you can then be able to perform some kind of investigation into what are the problems if that, if you still are, working within that set of constraints. So what could happen? What could go wrong if you propose this alternative option, for example? It could be to do with integration problems. It could be with interfacing problems. It could be to do with, for example, support. So for example, if you go with Microsoft, they've got a deal with the, as part of the licensing, that they support your, the solution that you're working with. They're going to have support, email support, telephonic support, and perhaps they can send an engineer if nothing works out in about 2-3 days or 72 hours. So that kind of support is there for them. But then if you do not have that, if you're going for a completely different solution, you might not have that support extended. So you need to look at all those aspects of the real-time problems that you might face if you are going for a different solution scope. And then what is the impact assessment? What's going to be the impact of that problem? If you still go ahead with that kind of a thing, what is the likelihood of some of the problems that could come through? And what is going to be the impact from the point of technology, from the point of view of finance, from the point of view of effort, resources, all of those? And finally, what is the total impact in terms of the ownership, total cost of ownership, to go ahead with that option? So again, all of that need to be decided. So that's very important to be considered when you try and look at the solution limitations. Again, we have to consider the important stakeholders here, which are to do with, for example, the customers. They're the best source for us to understand how our solutions are trying to work. What is the efficacy of the solution that we have proposed, and how does that fit into the overall workflow for customers? And the domain SMEs would offer you significant insights into the overall landscape of the potential options, even the problem landscape, problem space, how that really could be sorted out, how can we try and address different alternatives. And end users, again, would be a key stakeholder here to be able to give the feedback, significant feedback in terms of qualitative and quantitative performance of our data and the solution. The sponsors, again, would be key here, because they hold the key in terms of the budgets, the overall resources, and regulators sometimes would offer, try and come up with ways to help support your decision. So it's always important to just get the guidance or refer to some of the compliance or the regulatory requirements from the regulators. And then obviously testers would help us understand some of the limitations or constraints of a proposed solution. So all of these are different ways that we can try and operate our solution and understand where it has got the lacunae, where is it that is limiting the solution, how can we eliminate those limitations. Coming to the techniques, what are the techniques that we use here? Again, very important, we start off with the acceptance criteria. These are going to be providing us the definition of done. Benchmarking, again, I don't want to repeat here, but very important to get a view of the competitors and what they're doing. Interviews, again, to with the key stakeholders. Business rules analysis and business rules implementation here is an additional one, which we can try and discuss. So business rules here in the context of the solution limitations could primarily be around the business specific or the organization specific context and the environment, the procedures, the policies. Those would actually be defining you the boundaries within which you need to operate. So you can't really go out of those. So sometimes the business rules would be handy. And I think in the next activity, we're going to discuss this in detail, because that's about the organization's limitations, not just the technology or the solution. So very important. And based on these, what we do is obviously the decision analysis in terms of the go, no go decision that would be taken. Very important for us to consider these limitations to carry out that technique, the decision analysis. The risk analysis and management, again, very crucial at this stage to conduct the risk analysis, identify all the potential risks and take some of the decisions in those around those. And lessons learned, very important. It can be either the lessons learned internally from a similar set of exercises or techniques that you have implemented or projects that you had implemented within the organization, as well as you can learn the lessons from benchmarking and comparing with other organizations that you're benchmarking with. Data mining, again, is a very important thing here, because you're trying to analyze the data that you have. You want to assess if you've got the right kind of data that would help you to take the right decisions, that would help you reach the to-be situation that you've proposed and deliver the potential value that you have set out in the solution scope. The surveys or questions, again, a good quantitative data gathering, quantitative data that would really help you to assess the overall aspect of how the customers and end users are perceiving your product and the solution at this stage. And the root cause analysis would actually, help you delve deeper into the, some of the key causes, key concerns that you have had in terms of the limitations of the solution and what you can do. How can you come around, come with a workaround strategy to overcome those limitations and those problems. So these are the set of techniques that would really help you to get to the next stage. And you're now realizing that you're slowly going to the solution space, and these are all the techniques that you could deploy to help you get to the